Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree, and today we're talking about tomatoes. There are all sorts of different kinds and shapes and sizes. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but this is going to be some quick tips, and I'm going to go through it fairly fast for you guys because I've talked about tomatoes before. First things first, tomatoes, like watermelon, are actually a berry. So despite the fact that they are a fruit, we tend to think of them as culinary vegetables. In other words, when we cook with them, we treat them like vegetables. So they have that savory umami kind of flavor, similar to mushrooms, which the best way I can say that in an English word is probably savory. They essentially have a savory taste that makes other dishes more satisfying. Obviously, not all tomatoes look like this. Most of the tomatoes that we see look like this. Fairly uniform and red and good for slicing. But the thing about tomatoes like this, even though they really definitely have a place in cooking, is that they have been bred to be uniformly red. And when they grow uniformly red like this, you lose a lot of sugars and flavors that you have in tomatoes like this. You don't get a perfectly even texture when you have these heirloom types of tomatoes. They tend to have little bulges and bumps to them. They're closer to the original tomato, which is a South American, Central American food originally. And the word there for them sort of translated to swollen fruit or fat fruit because they were these big, juicy, succulent things that grew on these wild plants. And as you can see, again, had a less than uniform texture, but were really tasty. Now you can still get a pretty good variety of tomatoes. For example, we have in right now these little local tomatoes that come in a whole bunch of different colors, and these are cherry tomatoes. They're round like a cherry. Or you can get the longer grape variety, and these are some of my favorites. I find that the yellow and orange tomatoes are a lot less acidic than the red tomatoes, so they can be really nice if you're somebody who's prone to heartburn or where the acid kind of bothers your mouth. Getting other shades of tomato than red may help you with those problems. Another fun random fact, the Latin name for tomato, which I'm never going to say right if I don't read it, Lycopersicum, Solanum lycopersicum. So lycopersicum actually means wolf peach. So over the years we've been pretty creative about the way that we name our tomatoes. I know most of us for most of the year here in Michigan are eating our tomatoes in the forms of things like ketchup or salsa because they just don't travel that well. But I want to make a couple suggestions to you if you like to eat tomatoes in other seasons of the year that you can do now while we have a lot of them to work with. So for smaller tomatoes like this, I actually like to dehydrate them. The easiest way to do that is simply to cut these in half and just kind of push out the seeds and the goo with your thumb, and they dry really nicely. They take up a lot less room, and it doesn't require the equipment that's necessary for something like freezing or canning. You don't have to take up a bunch of room in your freezer. You don't have to have a bunch of jars of juicy tomatoes in your cupboard. You can shrink all of these down, put them in one jar, and be throwing them in casseroles and soups and chilies all winter long. So the time to do that is now when tomatoes are abundant and delicious. Another thing that's great in other times of the year that you can make now is tomato paste. You would have to can this or freeze it if you make your own. But if you remove the peels by blanching, which is basically cutting, if you get a tomato like this, cut a little X in the bottom and you drop it into boiling water, just not very long, just a few seconds, and then scoop it out and put it in ice water, the skin will peel off. So you remove that skin and then you take the seeds out of the inside and you can cook it down to create a nice uniform tomato paste. And that paste is going to add a huge pop of flavor even with just a little spoonful of it all during the fall and winter and into spring when we don't have these lovely local tomatoes back in yet. So those are a couple suggestions on what you can do if you want to keep your tomatoes for longer when they're out of season here. But they can also really be enjoyable fresh. I think most of us have had a tomato sandwich a time or two. Another thing you can try is cutting slices of a fresh tomato, especially a larger tomato like this, and putting them on a pizza in place of sauce if you're making your own this time of year. It's got all of that extra pop of flavor, and if you really want to sweeten them up, you can lay them on, cook your pizza crust with the tomatoes on it for a few minutes under the broiler, and then put the rest of your toppings on. And you'll get a flavor that's very similar to something like a fire roasted canned tomato. It causes that caramelization, and especially if you're using an heirloom variety of tomato, there are enough sugars in it to give you a really delicious sweet flavor. And of course, there's always the classic tomato mozzarella salad combo. Now, I made one of those today, and you can see it looks a little bit different. It doesn't have the bright white in it because I used smoked vegan mozzarella. And using that smoked mozzarella or another cheese with a little extra oomph of flavor besides the classic mozzarella is going to give you more depth and interest to your salad, to the point where if you want to add a little protein, maybe like some black beans, you could almost use it as a main dish. The other thing that I did with this salad was, instead of basil, I used finely chopped shallots, and that gives you a more assertive flavor as well. So if you're eating that kind of on the side with other dishes, it's going to be a more standout side than just the classic light herbal option. So if you want to shake it up a little bit, try switching out your cheeses, try switching out your basil for other herbs, or adding them in addition to, and just getting creative with it. Obviously, it's also a great thing to throw some fresh tomatoes into your pasta salad, into your regular green salad, or if you really have a nice one, I keep bringing this one up because this is such a pretty tomato, try slicing it into nice little sort of wedges and just taking a little bit of crunchy sea salt and sprinkling that over the top and enjoying it just as a snack. It's a really tasty addition to any sort of crudité type thing, and that flavor is going to pop. We got to enjoy it while we have it. So there's your quick tomato rundown. If you want to try the salad I made, I'm going to be doing this for another hour or so. Come on in and see me. And if you just want to fill up your kitchen counters with some delicious tomatoes, don't refrigerate your fresh tomatoes if you can help it. It's not good for the texture. It's not good for the flavor. Refrigerating cooked tomatoes, great. Refrigerating fresh tomatoes, don't do it. So if you want to fill up your kitchen counter with some delicious local tomatoes, come down, check those out. And in the meantime, I hope you're having a great week and a happy Tuesday. Bye, guys.